Hello, I'm Shane Coolball, President of the York County Young Democrats here, Vice President.
Samantha Full.
And our guest today is George Scott, who is running for the 4th Congressional District of Pennsylvania. So I'm going to ask you our standard question, which is, what does being a Democrat mean to you?
So I think being a Democrat is an important question because too often we define ourselves by who or what we're against. And for me, coming from a family that has a long tradition of being Democrats, I would say in some ways it's as simple as being a Democrat means a belief that fundamentally government can make the lives of all people better.
Oh.
And it doesn't mean the government has to do everything, but it means the government can play a positive role in our society and in the lives of all individuals. And so that's what I think as a Democrat it starts at, and then of course there's specific policies and values that flow from that.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm first of all, I'm a resident of the district. Long time. I grew up here in the district, starting back in 1966. My dad retired from the Army and moved to South Central Pennsylvania, and they bought a farm. Because I guess after 30 years in the Army, he thought something easy like farming would be fun. So he farmed for 30 years. So I grew up in Adams County on a farm. We had beef cattle, and got to do a lot of hard work down there. Went to public schools down there and learned the value and importance of a good public education. And then headed off to college. Went down to D.C. at Georgetown University, the School of Foreign Service. Got a great education there. But it continued to come home because this is first and foremost my home. And even after college, when I went on active duty in the military, this was a place that I always came back to. So for me, first and foremost, I'm a resident of this district. This district is my home. My roots are here, and I care about it, and I care about the people that are in it. So I think that's probably the first thing that I would share. Second thing I would share is that I'm not a career politician. This is my first time running for elected office, which seems to be very common in the aftermath of 2016. There's a lot of folks that got energized, including myself. But I've spent my whole life pretty much in service. First 20 years as an active duty Army officer, serving around the world, including 5 years overseas, 4 years of those being in the Middle East, and multiple operational deployments with that. But of course, everyone takes off the uniform at some point, and so I did take off the uniform, but continued to serve. Served first in the Central Intelligence Agency down in Washington, D.C., and then went to work in the private sector for several years, but did things that I thought would be helpful for our nation, and tried to basically serve even in the private sector. And then finally, most recently, was called to serve in a different way. And in 2009, I moved back up here to Pennsylvania, and I live in York County, and I've been in ministry ever since 2009. So that's my latest calling. My latest way to serve is in my congregation and my community. So that'd be the second thing that I would say is that I'm a person of service, and with that background comes some very deeply embedded values, ones that I think are particularly important in this day and age, and in this election will be values of integrity, because that sometimes is absent in our political dialogue.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, and compassion, because I think that is really absent increasingly, and I think as a Democrat in particular, that's an important part of what we have to be. And the last thing I would say is that I'm a person who cares a lot about my family. So I've got a wife, I've got 2 kids, and they are probably the most important things going on in my life, above and beyond everything else. Yeah.
So, have you always been interested in running for elected office? I mean, you kind of touched on that, but, you know.
Yeah, I ran for a lot of offices in high school, but that was because there was nothing else to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had thought a little bit about politics when I was in college. I did a congressional internship in college, which was very interesting. I got to work for Congressman Goodling, who was the congressman from our district at the time. It was the 19th district. That's awesome. And was very interested potentially in going into politics. And thought I might end up doing that in my 20s, but as I said, I went on active duty in the Army. Thought I would stay 4 years. 4 turned into 5. 5 turned into 10, and then 10 turned into 20. And
just
that,
keep doubling it from there.
Yeah, I just kind of left it behind me and never really thought anything about it after probably I turned 30. But after the last election, then particularly January this past year, I really felt the calling again. And so that's what motivated me to run.
Well, I'm glad you are.
What is your favorite thing about the district that you hope to represent?
I would say it would be both the people and the climate. I'll start with the second one because it's a little easier to understand. The climate, because having lived around the world, there's not every place where there's 4 seasons.
I do love
So
that about here.
Yeah, so love 4 seasons, particularly fall. And yet there are places that have 4 seasons where it's just too darn hot in the summer or too darn cold in the winter, and Pennsylvania is a nice
Yeah.
nice mixture of those. And then in terms of the people here are really kind of down to earth, and they're not the easiest folks to get to know. They're not the easiest folks to get to earn their trust. But once you know them and they know you, and they get to the point where they trust you, they're great, and they'll be there and they'll do anything for you. And I think that just says a lot about the people of this district, and that's part of one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
Ordinary folk.
Yeah, exactly. There's no airs.
Yeah.
For people, they are who they are.
Yeah.
So you have a military background and now serve as a pastor. How do you feel that your career choices have prepared you for Congress?
So the military piece is extremely helpful in terms of a lot of different aspects, but first and foremost would be leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So the military is more than anything else about building leaders, and they start that with you from day one, and they continue until your final day. And so you literally change jobs every year, and you move on average every 1.5 to 2 years. So you're constantly dealing with new situations, new people, new issues, and as a leader, that's a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
But it as you grow accustomed to that, you get accustomed to, you come into a situation, you assess what's going on, you find the right people to help you deal with that situation, and then you find a common vision of what you want to do in the end, and you work together. And so I think that's a great preparation, because that kind of attitude and approach to governance seems to be missing today, particularly at the federal level. The local level is much better, but at the federal level, we see that the federal government is really dysfunctional.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of reasons for that, but I think one of the biggest ones is that people are simply not willing to work together. And whether we're Democrats or Republicans, we have to be willing to find common areas, work together, create practical, responsible solutions that will benefit not just our district, but also the nation.
Great.
Yeah. What is one issue that you feel very strongly about and that you would like to change while in office?
Well, I think the 3 most important issues for this campaign, at least at this point, would be healthcare, jobs, and education. I think those are fundamental issues because they affect either directly or indirectly every single person within this district.
And every other issue too, kind of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I think your question was, which one do I feel the most strongly about? And on that one, I might say, as nerdy as it sounds, campaign finance reform. Because I think that one of the fundamental issues that's causing this dysfunction and this gridlock is the amount of money and the way the money is entering the process.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have really got to change that if we have any hope of getting our federal government back on track. The Citizens United decision in particular is one that legislatively we just have to relook that. We cannot have organizations exercising free speech in the way that they are. There's just, it's an inordinate influence on the process, and it's not healthy. So I would really love to see that issue get changed and addressed.
How will you legislate differently than Scott Perry, who currently occupies the 4th District?
Well, that's a long list of things that I would say. I think
top 3.
Yeah. Well, I think the first part of being an effective legislator, effective representative, is sitting down and meeting regularly with the people in your district. Now, in fairness to Scott, he does do office calls, but in general, he has avoided town halls, and I think that's a fundamental part of being a representative. You have to get out, meet the people, listen to what they're saying, and actually try to hear them. And so that, I think, is the first and biggest change that I would do in terms of from the way that Scott runs. I would really try and listen to people, not just in one-on-ones or small groups, but get out and meet large groups, hear what their concerns are, hear what their issues are. And in fact, that's what I'm trying to do right now in terms of the campaign, is get out and meet with groups and find out what are the issues that are of greatest concern to them. I think the second thing, and it would be a major difference, would be Scott Perry has positioned himself to, frankly, the far right edge of the Republican Party. He's a Freedom Caucus measure. And because of that, he is ideologically committed to a set of values that I don't think serve the best interests of the people of this district as a whole. They certainly serve the interests of select groups, but again, your representative is supposed to represent all people of the district. So while it's fairly generic, an important part, and I think a distinctive way that I would have it is I would try and reach out and represent all people rather than just a certain portion of the political spectrum. I'm a moderate Democrat. I mean, I'm a Democrat, but I'm a moderate Democrat, and I think that I can meet with and talk with and understand almost all people and develop legislative solutions that will actually serve all people in the district. And then I think the third thing is there's a tendency, and this is not just for Scott Perry, but for all Republicans, to too often view things through primarily a financial lens. And our government is about people. And financial issues are important, and we can't ignore them. But at the end of the day, if we place financial concerns above the concerns of the people, then I think we've failed to do what representative government is all about.
Yeah.
So those would be probably three big things that would be distinct from the way he governs.
Yeah. Is there anybody that you credit for kind of inspiring you to take this path of leadership?
I would probably point first and foremost to my dad. So my dad was, he was born in 1915, and he grew up in Texas in the Depression. And his father died at a young age. I remember him telling me that one of the jobs he did as a teenager was he delivered ice using a horse-drawn wagon to ice boxes. This was before refrigerators, okay? And the pay was almost nothing. And when he finished high school, there were almost no jobs. This was still in the early 1930s, and it was very tough. But he really credited the Roosevelt administration for bringing our nation back up on its feet. And then he, in turn, entered the military in 1935 and served for 30 years. And then after he got out, even though farming was his primary occupation, more than anything, he was a public servant. If there was an elected office in a civic organization, then he, more likely than not, served in it.
That's great.
And he was the chairman of the Adams County Democratic Party for the better part of a decade. And so seeing his service ethic, and my mom had it as well, I shouldn't exclude her, but in particular his service ethic really influenced me, and I think led me not only into the military, but into this venture now.
That's usually what people say.
Yeah, people always say their dad.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing. And as a father, it's something I have to be really cognizant of, with two kids, with a 20-year-old and a 17-year-old, of what example am I setting for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're doing a great job.
Yeah, me too.
Thanks.
So, how can anyone who's looking to get involved in your campaign get involved?
Okay. Well, there's a bunch of different ways, but the simplest way would be to go to our website, georgescottforcongress.com, and that's George Scott, and then the number 4, as the 4th district. There you go. And then congress.com. And on there, you'll be able to find ways that you can sign up for emails, so you can get information from the campaign. You can volunteer if you want to do a volunteer event with the campaign. If you want to host a house party, which is a great way for me to meet people in your neighborhood, that's another thing you can do. And of course, if you want to make a donation, those would be greatly appreciated, because campaigns these days unfortunately cost money.
Yeah.
And so we do seek donations from folks. But I would say that in terms of our approach to donations, my hope and my prayer is that we will end up following a model much closer to that Bernie Sanders pursued.
Yeah.
I would love to have every person in this district who's willing to vote for me contribute $25 and just get a small number of very wealthy donors or reliant organizations. I would love to see a huge number of donors
Yeah.
Yeah.
in the campaign. So, yeah, so those are just a couple of the ways that folks can help. And I think one of the other ways is just tell your friends and neighbors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think that this election, 2018, is going to be what some folks refer to as a wave election.
Yeah.
We're going to see a lot of change.
Yeah.
And I think folks need to be alerted to that. A lot of times I think people don't vote because they're discouraged. They think my vote doesn't count, it's not going to change anything. 2018 is going to be a year where votes are going to count. And if everybody gets out and votes for a candidate that they know and trust, I think we'll see change not just in Congress, but at all levels of our government, change for the better, to get our government back to working for the people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with you there.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate your invitation, and I hope we'll get to sit down with you and the York County Young Democrats again sometime in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
All right. So that's all we have today, but subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay in tune with what's going on with all the campaigns for 2018. Thank you.